It is a welcome reversal of the trends in the last 15 years to burn increasing amounts of biomass from our forests, while attracting billions in renewable energy subsidies. The original idea of labelling biomass renewable was that local leftovers from the use of sustainably harvested forests could generate some extra energy and help climate a little. As a result, tens of millions of tons of forests are being converted to pellets that are traded around the world and burnt in power stations that used to run on coal. And shifting from that initial concept to the current huge scale of forest harvesting achieves the opposite. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is higher than if coal was still used, with very little prospect of it being reduced in less than several decades. So the exclusion of primary woody biomass is the first step towards reversing this damaging trend and can be a start to limiting subsidies to biomass that actually helps us avoid overshooting the Paris Agreement targets. Burning wood emits more carbon dioxide for every kilowatt hour generated than even coal, and that is in sharp contrast with wind and solar that emit hardly any CO2 when operating. So it may seem rather strange that they should be equally eligible for renewable energy subsidies. The reason is that it was assumed the extra CO2 would be absorbed as a forest regrew, but this is a very slow process and delays any beneficial climate effect for decades, or even may never happen in some cases. But that simple assumption and the international reporting rules allow you to ignore the millions of tons coming out of the stack when the biomass is burnt. The power station and country can thus report a reduction in emissions if they switch to biomass, even though those emissions are going up. Unfortunately, the atmosphere is not so easily fooled and has to accept the millions of tons of extra CO2 thanks to this policy. As a use for the limited subsidies available for renewable energy, this is completely counterproductive. The important thing is that the Parliament's decision should be taken as a starting point for negotiations to improve it by clarifying and tightening the exemptions, which otherwise could lead to large loopholes. Currently, the exemptions are too vague, and there is a danger that powerful economic stakeholders will just continue business as usual, perhaps with an additional bit of greenwashing, whereas to mitigate the climate damage of current policies, they really do need to return to the original concept of only using genuine leftovers of traditional forestry operations and not cutting down additional forests, as is currently the case. This is what exempting primary woody biomass from subsidy should achieve if it is properly applied. But of course, the current scale of the industry would lose a substantial part of its subsidy. The key message to the other two parties in the trilogue is that without proper tightening of the definition of primary woody biomass, we may continue the damage to climate, biodiversity and forests that is happening under current regulations. Unfortunately, many member states depend rather a lot on bioenergy to meet their renewable energy targets. But we do hope they will recognise that it is the real effects on climate that matter, not just paper accounting, and transfer their subsidies to more effective uses. That could be to greatly enhance energy efficiency, more solar and wind, or even geothermal and tidal in some areas. Instead of burning wood or fossil fuels for heating, using heat pumps. There is no shortage of effective technologies that will lead to short-term reductions in atmospheric CO2 levels and offer much better value for money. At present, the exemptions include forests which are damaged by fire, pests or diseases. But it also allows for the felling of forests in order to reduce fire risk. And the latter is a particularly wide loophole. You could always justify felling a forest to reduce risk because a removed forest is no longer able to catch fire. These exemptions need to be properly defined and ultimately lead to restricting subsidised sources of biomass to those which have a climate beneficial and preferably biodiversity neutral effects. From the climate point of view, it's quite important to use the forest biomass to generate longest life uses as possible. So the priorities would be for timbering construction or infrastructure or furniture, where the carbon is locked away for decades or even centuries. Other uses of traditional forestry, ranging from board to paper, do at least keep their carbon out of the atmosphere for several years. And recognizing this, the Commission has a cascade of priorities which recommends exactly this priority. And bioenergy is so low in priority that it is only one step worse than throwing it away. This cascade may help member states to actually question whether putting billions of subsidies towards such a low priority option is really such a good idea or really a perverse use of public money.